So much happening in the world. Just last night, so first of all, we had NBC reporting that contrary to what President Trump had said, in fact, there was no meaningful intelligence gathered from the Yemen operation where Ryan Williams was killed. And then the New York Times today has a great story elaborating on that. Then we had the New York Times report with tremendous new details about the cooperation between, or the contacts between the Trump team and the Kremlin, including indications that European intelligence organizations had monitored meetings in European cities and passed that information on to the U.S. government. And then in addition, and then also intercepts of Kremlin officials in which they were recounting their contacts with the Trump team. And then on top of that, we had a Washington Post bombshell indicating that Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who in his confirmation hearings had very flatly said, I've had no communication with the Russians. Then, what do you know? It turns out that he actually did have 2 meetings with the Russian ambassador. One was a little bit innocuous, but one was a meeting in his Senate offices with the Russian ambassador. And look, I think senators should meet with foreign ambassadors, but I also think that when they're under oath, they shouldn't lie about it. And I don't buy Jeff Sessions' explanations about what went on. It seems to me that if you have a meeting and then you say that you've had no communication, that just doesn't wash with me. And we all remember Bill Clinton getting in trouble for lying under oath about relations with that woman. It sure seems to me that lying under oath about relations with that woman pales beside lying under oath about relations with that Russian ambassador at a time when that Russian ambassador is also engaged in a broader effort to attack the American electoral process. So today, all kinds of things happening. We've got Democrats mostly calling for Sessions to resign, and we have Republicans calling on him to recuse himself from investigations involving Russia. I think that is important. I think it has to be clear he recuses himself not just from any investigations of Jeff Sessions, but also from any investigations having anything to do with Trump-Russia connections. But I also think this just cries out is another reminder why we need an independent investigation of what was going on in that election. And the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence is going to do a job. They've got lots of other things to do. They mostly deal with non-public hearings. We need public hearings, and I think a 9/11 style commission is the best way to go. But Isvet Verde is handling the camera today. Zoe is off. Isvet, what questions have come in to put me on the spot?
So lots of great questions already. We have one from Pamela Neal Thomas. It says, what can we do that will be effective in holding the GOP feet to the fire and obtaining a Sessions-free investigation?
I think it's going to be pressure on Republican senators and House members in particular that we need to clear the air. And indeed, that seems to be what Republicans think. The latest poll I saw was that I think by about a 75 to 25% split, Americans wanted a major investigation of what went on. Former President George W. Bush has called for that. This is in the interest of President Trump as well as the country. And so I think it's going to be a matter of going to town meetings, of writing letters, of calling congressional offices, and making sure it doesn't get buried in congressional hearings, especially closed hearings, but that it does happen, ideally with an independent 9/11 style commission, alternatively with a select committee established for this purpose. But there has to be some independent outside investigation. Is that?
Yeah, we have another question from Christina Lett that says, it's not a coincidence that multiple people in this administration are getting caught lying about Russia ties. Why lie about obvious, easily discovered things? Because you're hiding something worse?
I mean, it is interesting that the minefields have all involved Russia, and it's also interesting that whenever there have been these reports about Russia, that's when President Trump kind of goes berserk and denounces the press as enemies of the people, this kind of thing. And in my experience, when presidents or prime ministers start denouncing you for being enemies of the people, that's probably when you're getting pretty close to something powerful and important that should be revealed. And so I hope that, I think the press has done a great job on this. I think a lot of us in the press felt kind of sorry for the Washington Post that they were doing all this great reporting and President Trump wasn't denouncing them. He was really focused on the New York Times and the CNN, and I think they felt a little belittled by their failure to be castigated. And I hope that he will indeed now castigate them equally because they deserve it with their outstanding reporting. I should also say that normally I'm, of course, an op-ed columnist. Today, for the first time, I am actually not an op-ed columnist, just an op columnist, because my column, the New York Times redid the opinion page, and today my column is at the bottom of the opinion page rather than on the op-ed page. And so I hope you'll get a chance to look at, here we go. Take a look at my column. It looks at its spending priorities, and it argues that President Trump's call for hugely expanding military spending by cutting spending on diplomacy and on aid is counterproductive, and that it's things like diplomacy, things like aid, things like girls' education around the world that actually are really important to our national security, and that's what generals understand. That's why generals and admirals are the strongest advocates for this kind of spending. So I hope you'll get a chance to read that. Questions about that, welcome too. And is that?
Yeah, we have one from Paul K. Ward that says, how are Republicans and conservative media spinning this? I know some suggest recusal for Sessions, but is this even a hot topic for the right?
Well, I must say that in general, and it's Democrats and Republicans alike are vulnerable to this. When information comes in that doesn't fit into our worldview, the tendency is just to ignore it and think it's not important. And in general, I'd say that Fox News in recent days and some of the conservative websites have not so much attacked these kind of reports as they have just not paid so much attention to them. And to the extent that they have in the case of Sessions, it has been talking about recusal, but in some cases talking about recusal as that he will recuse himself from any investigation of himself. Well, duh, of course. But the Attorney General is also overseeing the FBI. And can you imagine what you would feel like if you were an FBI agent who had been monitoring Sessions, and apparently they knew about these contacts with the Russian ambassador, and then you watched him under oath say to his confirmation hearings that he had had no such contacts, and then you see him assume the job of Attorney General and your boss? What would you think as an FBI agent? There has been some commentary from the right that it's unfair that these leaks are happening, especially now. Partly, they argue that it's after President Trump gave a pretty well-reviewed speech to joint session of Congress, and this is out to take away, to undermine his hour. That may be right. I don't know. But boy, I mean, this is important stuff.
I'm seeing something here on CNN that's saying several Republicans, many of them increasingly uneasy about the implications of the evolving Russian drama, called on Sessions to recuse himself from any involvement in an FBI probe into ties between the Trump campaign and Moscow. And House Speaker Paul Ryan says if he himself is the subject of an investigation, of course he would. But if he's not, I don't see any purpose or reason to doing this. Yeah,
Paul Ryan has given kind of the more mealy-mouthed version of what kind of recusal should happen. Kevin McCarthy in the House gave a tougher version that seemed to indicate that Sessions should recuse himself from any investigation involving Russia. Senator Rob Portman said something similar, and I think it has to be that stronger version of recusal. And I also think, as I said, that that recusal cannot be a substitute for not having an independent investigation. There is a cloud over the integrity of our electoral process. Our country was attacked as much as it was in 9/11, and we can't just sort of go on as if this didn't happen. We need to find out what happened with public hearings, with a panel that has subpoena power, and let the public know what happened.
We have a question from Charlie Melk that says, look at the Warren Commission and the 9/11 Commission. It might be cynical, but how could a commission such as these accomplish anything other than a show trial? By the way, I agree with you, but have very little faith in any official government commission. Fox is guarding the chickens.
I disagree with you on that. I think that the Warren Commission did a pretty good job, and that if it had not been for the Warren Commission, the country would have been just torn apart by conspiracy theories for years and for decades. Likewise, the 9/11 Commission. I think, obviously there were still conspiracy theories that survived, but I think they did a fine job. They had excellent people on it, and they wrote a report that you'll remember was a bestseller and was widely read. And I think that was a excellent example of what an outside commission can do. One of the real flaws of an outside commission is that it has to be established by law, and so Congress, both chambers of Congress, would have to agree to create such a panel, and then President Trump could veto the proposal, and he might well choose to veto a panel that would be investigating him. I don't think that Congress would be able to overturn that kind of veto, but I do think that it's important to try that approach, and if it can't be done, then Congress can establish a select committee, not the Senate Intelligence Committee, which is kind of holding the football right now, but something else.
We have a question from Terry Graham. It says, isn't there a chain of command where that information could have come out during his confirmation hearings?
Well, one of the things that I was wondering about was whether Senator Franken, in asking the question, might have heard about those meetings and might have asked the question, for a purpose, to get to raise the issue. But I don't know. That's complete speculation on my part. But I do think that March is the wrong time for these revelations to come out, especially revelations on things that happened months and months ago. I think the Obama administration made a profound mistake in not going public before the election, before November 8th, when voters should have had this information. Now, I understand that President Obama didn't want to prejudge the situation. He didn't want to seem to be politicizing an election, though I think he had the best of intentions, I also think he was wrong, and I think partly that was a misjudgment about what was going to happen. I think he thought Trump was going to lose anyway. He gambled, and it wasn't just that he lost, I think the country lost. This should have come out months and months ago.
We have a question from David Price. There may be a reason for Sessions to talk to the Russians, but what's the reason for lying about it?
I think you're exactly right. I think that Sessions should be talking to the ambassador from Russia, from other ambassadors, and Sessions said that he was talking with many, many ambassadors from different countries, and the Washington Post polled other members of the committee, and they had not had contacts with the ambassador. Claire McCaskill went on Twitter, and she said that she had never had meetings with the Russian ambassador. It turned out that she'd had some interactions, but no meeting in her office. And so, but I completely agree with your take that nothing wrong with such a meeting. The problem is lying about it under oath. And, Sessions says that he wasn't lying because he wasn't talking with the Russian ambassador about the campaign, but the DOJ did say that he was actually talking about, in passing, about some election-related issues, and then to tell the Senate committee that, I've had no communication with the Russians. It's interesting to look back. In 1999, Jeff Sessions denounced Bill Clinton during the impeachment trial of Bill Clinton and said that it was inappropriate for him to remain as president because he had lied under oath. Well, Mr. Sessions, I think you had a point in 1999.
We have comments both from Barbara Breckenridge Dunn and Linda Sharp. They're phrased differently, but the gist of it is the Obama group made a mistake. Obama should have let this information go public months ago.
I agree with that. I think that President Obama miscalculated. I think he thought that President Trump would lose in any case. I think he was afraid about politicizing the electoral process. But he was wrong in who he thought would win or how close he thought it would be. And at the end of the day, this is information that the country had to have, that voters had to have. And, if this were a parliamentary system of government where if there were revelations or a taint on a particular head of government, then that person could be changed overnight, it wouldn't be so serious. We are stuck with President Trump for 4 years. And it was incumbent, I think, on President Obama to let what information he had go before the American public. I think he blew it.
And from Karen Freitas Noble, Paul Ryan just said that he is against passing a law for a special prosecutor. Is anything going to ever happen on this string of Russian connections? Is there anything voters can do to get transparency?
Well, I think that there are going to be more revelations coming out about this. I've been trying to report on this a little bit, and I think the intelligence community has more information. I think they're continuing to dig. I think this will dribble out in a way that is bad for President Trump and bad for America, and will ultimately create greater pressure on Congress to do the right thing and have a real and thorough investigation. But there's not much that the public can do to push Republican House and Senate members to do the right thing, other than just go to constituent meetings and call their offices and push them to do so. And invariably, this becomes a highly partisan issue, and that's one reason why it would be so good to have this not be conducted by a Senate committee, but by an outside group, with people like Colin Powell or Sandra Day O'Connor, who have the public trust and could cast a judgment about whether the Russians have stolen the election and handed it to President Trump.
From Siddharth Walia, so is there no way Democrats can take this to the next level? Are we left on discretion of Republicans to take action on this?
I think sadly we are. I mean, obviously Democrats can pressure Republicans and can embarrass them, but at the end of the day, it's Republicans in the House and Senate who control where this is going to go. It was really unfortunate that Senator Richard Burr of the Senate Intelligence Committee was used by the White House to try to shoot down stories about the Trump-Russia connection. I think that left a sour taste in the public. He's leading an investigation, and he's already being used as a tool of the White House. I do think that there are a lot of senators and House members, including Republicans, who are profoundly uncomfortable with the idea that the Russians have interfered in our electoral process. And while we don't we don't know what happened with the Trump team and Russian intelligence. We know there are these strange communications. We don't know what the nature of those contacts were. What we do know is that President Trump has been sympathetic to President Putin in a way that is completely outside the spectrum of bipartisan relations with Russia for the last 70 years. We don't understand why.
And our last question will come from Molly Wolf. I've been reading about the operations by Russia and other countries, and they're really going dark lately. They're striving to finance Le Pen, etc. We heard about the corrupt Russian banks, especially discussed in Panama Papers. We've heard they may be associated with the Trump businesses too, from computer experts claiming an email trail between a bank and a Russian bank. Is there any way these things tie together? Also, by the way, a friend was a highly classified employee with OPM, which was hacked at classified levels by China. Why are we not looking at the involvement with them by Trump businesses now? Yes, I thought the same thing about Franken.
So the OPM, the Office of Personnel Management, was indeed hacked by China. That's kind of what intelligence organizations do. They steal information. There was nothing, in a sense, wrong about China doing that. We would do the same if we could steal their secrets. What was highly unusual about the Russian hacking was that they didn't just steal America's secrets, or the secrets of the Democratic Party, but they then weaponized that information to help one candidate, President Trump. They also apparently were stealing information from Republicans. They did not weaponize that because they had a particular outcome that they desired. And so, it is a little bit, I do think that there are real conflicts of interest when the Trump family does business in China, but those are conflicts of interest. I think that is different from what is happening with Russia. And, I guess, let me just say in closing that, I think there are a lot of skeptics out there who think this is just Democrats being upset and sour grapes. And, it's true that a lot of things affected the election outcome. If Hillary Clinton had campaigned in Wisconsin, that might have made a difference. If James Comey hadn't gone public with the email issues shortly before the election, that might have made a difference. There are so many, if we in the news media had done a better job in the last couple of months, that might have made a difference in the outcome. But I also think it would have made a difference in a very close election if Russia had not stolen information and then released it so as to damage Hillary Clinton and so as to assist President Trump. And so, one difference with Watergate in 1972 is that President Nixon and the White House operations in Watergate didn't affect the outcome of the election. He would have won anyway. What happened this time may well have affected the election outcome. It was overdetermined. Lots of things affected it. And nothing is more important than the integrity of our electoral process. When a foreign country attacks our electoral process, then we have to investigate. And when you have figures who are lying under oath about meetings with the Russian ambassador, that is an awful lot more important than lying under oath about a blowjob. And so that's why we need a credible, independent investigation of what happened. Thanks very much.